breaker, breaker into the black. This is long haul preacher and I ain't going back.
Therefore, putting aside all filthiness and all that remains of wickedness, in humility receive the word implanted, which is able to save your souls. But prove yourselves doers of the word, and not merely hearers who delude themselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks at his natural face in a mirror. For once he has looked at himself and gone away, he has immediately forgotten what kind of person he was. But one who looks intently at the perfect law, the law of liberty, and abides by it, not having become a forgetful hearer, but an effectual doer, this man will be blessed in what he does. James chapter 1, verses 21 through 25. Well, howdy, y'all, and welcome to the mess that is my home office. It is still a work in progress. First, I would like to thank you all for being patient with me. The last 2 years, I've seen 2 surgeries in 2 locations on my left side, physical therapy, jumping into a doctoral program on top of that, and no, I don't know why either. But along the way, I discovered something. Without diving into the Bible every day, it is too easy to fall into the ways of the world. And it is that thought that brings me to the first in this year's first series, How to Get Lost in the World. Yep, I said it correctly. I'm not going to talk about how not to get lost, how to stay on the right path, but about how we get lost in worldly things, far from God, just like the prodigal son running towards his perceived life of leisure on his daddy's money. So, just so you know, this is being broadcast both on YouTube, as you might see it in picture, and on SoundCloud. This is going to be the format for this month and this month only. After this month, it'll go to audio only for a time until well, frankly, some money can come in because I'm just out of time and I'm having to work on the side to get anywhere. So, the prodigal son. The prodigal son is a story in Luke chapter 15 of a son who decides he doesn't want to wait for his father to die. He wants what is coming to him so he can go international to someplace he always wanted to go to do whatever he dreamed of. And he does. He goes and gets lost in the world. But then maybe his brother does as well in a way, but more on that later. Now let's get started. I started off this podcast sermon with James chapter 1 verses 21 through 25, a warning not to just hear the word of God, but to instead live the word of God. Before that is a well-known and often repeated passage, everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger, for the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. That's verses 19 and 20. It was a good thing I did not restart the podcast last month, February 2020, because it was the beginning of the political slaughter. Season. I wanted to speak on the nature of the lesser of evils, but that would mean getting into the muck with everyone else on things that, to be frank, has no end. It is all being in the world. So, how do I know when I am lost in the world? One way is the opposite of James' warning. Don't bother hearing others, just think of yourself. Be quick to speak your mind and be quick to get angry without the thought of understanding the other person or any care for anyone else. I assure you, being the angry guy is one sure way to make others angry, dragging everyone down into the muck of the world. And here's an even more painful truth. We know it. We know it. We know it and we do it anyway. There is something about that muck that draws us in. A trap. In the words, I have the right. 1 John chapter 2, 21 reminds us of this, that we don't need God to tell us his word what it is, because we already know. God does not need to tell us the truth. We already know the truth. We know what is sinful, and we do it anyway. It is easier to be of the world than of God. Now, I know there's a lot of people who are going to listen to this and go, what is he talking about? I don't get angry. I don't do any of that stuff. Well, remember this from childhood? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. You know that's not true. We adults knowingly trade barbs in heated so called debates that typically end in character assassination of an opponent. It's not debate, by the way. Debate is talking about the logic, the facts of the matter. Debate done in anger is not debate. We know that words hurt. We laugh at insults against anyone but ourselves. Of course, we know it hurts. It is done out of hatred and out of anger, and there is a temporary relief in letting that anger out. But it is temporary. It is the same as drugs and alcohol. The excitement of the roll of the dice. We create the tension in our lives and revel when that tension is temporarily relieved, only to do it all over again just for that feeling of relief. But we forget, as Jesus points out, God knows that it is one sinful step towards the end of that same line of thought, murder. Anger is equated to murder. Anger is, to use a modern phrase, a gateway drug. Not everyone will become a mass murderer, don't get me wrong, but enough will to make life and living miserable for the rest. So you want to be more in the world? Be angry. You want to be more in the world? Get heavily involved in the political posturing we are drowning in right now. You want to be more in the world? Cut off someone in traffic just for being in the way. Yell, scream, shout your anger. Get lost in the world. That's how to do it. Now let's get back to that well-known story of the prodigal son. The son, battered by the world, returns home, hoping to just be a slave on his father's estate, the same estate his father has already given to him and his brother, right? It's not his father's anymore. Interesting, right? Because his father is so loved by everyone around him that when he barks out orders for the best robe and the slippers and the fatted calf to be slaughtered and roasted for the feast, all of this for a son who has returned, everyone jumps to it. Everyone, that is, except for his other son. His other son is fuming. This is his inheritance that his father is spending, and all for the brother who left, not for the one who now ran the land. Like his brother, he had his money, but instead of setting his sight on spending it, he set his sight on making even more. His father remained loving to both sons, gently explaining to his irate son after the fuming was done that this was a celebration of the return of one who was lost in the world and now back in his loving father's arms. He was trying to explain to his angry son he too was lost. In anger, there is always two sides, but only the third, the one of love, patient, comfort, who hears first, speaks last, holds back anger, is outside the world. I like that thought of being outside the world. How about you? This has been a long haul preacher sermon, slow to speak. The first of the How to Get Lost in the World series, March 2020. This recording is copyright 2020, At His Feet, PBC, doing business as Long Haul Preacher, all rights reserved.